time you log in a token error, even though, do you ever get that?
Oh,
Hi, Bill.
Hi.
We were having our own meeting.
Yeah, good, yeah. It's quite funny. The same thing happened last night, and I went into the meeting. Oh my God, everybody's there. Whatever way I set it up this time, it must be because of the registration process that means you automatically get into the meeting, you know, whereas before it was like a waiting list. Good, no, please carry on. We're waiting for other people to show up anyway, so.
Token error?
Yes, I was just wondering, not every time, but sometimes I go in and I get a message saying token error. And I wondered if anyone else gets it. Other times I know if I do a typo, it comes up with a different message. But this is ones where I really make sure I've got the right one in.
This is going into the Prag Tracker site, is it?
Yes, and I'll get that. And it just means I have to do it again. It must just be something with mine then.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
Oh, there we go. Everyone's arriving.
Like the doorbell. It's like house party, if anyone remembers that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That door doesn't.
It's interesting how we have to spend so much time looking at our backgrounds, doesn't it? You know, we're not just looking at how dreadful the light is on our faces. I've spent hours and hours trying to adjust my background because I've got a very dark stone wall behind me, and it sucks up all the light and turns me into a ghost. So I've had to put a curtain.
Have you tried using the virtual backgrounds of Zoom?
Oh yeah, they look awful. They just look
yeah.
awful.
Yeah,
and I you know, that fuzzy edge it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
so
it's halo, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's true. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there's 9 or 10 people coming. So I'll just wait a couple of minutes, give people a chance. So I don't know if any of you were in the Thursday one in February when I lost signal and I had all sorts of trouble.
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, I thought, I'm damned if that's going to happen to me again. So I've come over to my friend's house here in Wales, and he's just had a bloody great big fiber optic cable put to his house. I tested the speed yesterday. It was like 147 megabytes. Oh my God. Base age stuff. So, and this is out in the wilds of Anglesey as well. So
yeah, that's amazing. I'm in the wilds of Northern Ireland, and I've just had fiber optic put in as well. So
had you? Yeah.
And 2 days after I had it installed in my office, it broke because some engineer had installed it badly. So.
Oh no. Oh, hi, Joe.
Hi. Apologies if I just put my screen off for a few minutes because I need to desperately make a cup of coffee, but I'm still listening. Is that okay?
No, I think we'll allow that, Joe. That's fine. Great. Okay, so I think that's more or less everybody. Let me go and find my presentation thing over here. So I'll get that in the right place. Okay, that's that. Great. Okay, so we'll get the ball rolling, and then if there's anyone else turning up, they can just join in. So that'll be fine. So welcome everybody. Lovely to see you all again. And here we go. Right. So this month I'm only on one screen as well, so I can't see you all down the sides. I can see Corinne and Elizabeth. So shout at me if if you think somebody's just shout out. There's only a small group anyway, so just shout out if you want to interrupt me and ask me something at any point. So okay, welcome. So it's being recorded. Is it being recorded? That's a good point. Is it being recorded? 1 second, stop the share and see. Yes,
it says it is. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, good. Yeah. Right, that's good. Okay. Yeah, so obviously, and I'll send you the links afterwards. They just go on to a continuing playlist. But I think I wanted to make the point, if there was something you wanted to say that you didn't want to on the recording, you know, wanted it off the record, then just tell me and I'll pause the recording for that moment. I mean, it's hardly, you know, there was nothing sensational came out last night anyway that would have caused any bother. And yeah, raise your hand, bring my attention if you have any questions. I always point out I'm not an official HGI trainer or anything like that, although I'd be happy to see this as included eventually back into the training. But I'm just pointing that out. And also that it's according to HGI definitions of continuing professional development, this certainly fits within that category. So I think you're perfectly justified in claiming an hour of CPD and any other stuff you do to educate yourself with in this area. Okay, mission for the month. So following Q&A and any discussions arising out of that, questions already submitted to me and any that arise from you guys, I wanted the theme for this month to be talking a bit about recording and tracking goals, and if we have time to talk a little bit about problems and a use of the problems feature within Pragmatic Tracker. So any outstanding issues or concerns? So these are the questions. So let's deal with these. Okay, so the first one was, and I don't know whether the questions came from your group or last night's group. So I thought, well, I'll answer them in both cases because they may be relevant. So I find outcome measures confusing as some improve, you know, the score goes up, or for some and goes down for others, etc. Could you make more information available about that? Well, what I wanted to say about this is there is more information available on most of the measures. It's on pragmatictracker.com. You need to click on what else is there, and then you'll see a link to measures, and you click on measures and you get to this page here. And that page is, in fact, what I need to do, what I didn't do. I meant to put these in a minute, remind me, and I'll put these into the chat, these links. But anyway, that's how you get to it. pragmatictracker.com/measures. You'll get, I always recommend to people to print off a PDF of these measures, to print, so you've got a paper version to allow you, if you're new to this, to give you a chance to get familiar with the measures. So you'll know, for example, if a high score is good or bad by just looking at the measure and understanding. So classically, for example, core 10 scores improve with reduction, whereas PRN 14 scores improve with increase. PRN 14, 14 items, 0 to 10 is the answer, 0 to 140 is the range. So obviously the higher up, the better. Core 10 is inverted. If the closer to 0 is the better. So I think beyond that though, it's pretty easy to look up. You won't find much in the public domain about PRN 14. I've just actually completed writing a validation paper about it. I've submitted it to mental health review, and then they threw it back to me and said that actually they don't do validation papers. So send it somewhere else. So thanks a lot. So I've got to find another journal to submit it to, but the paper is written at least. So that's something. The other thing I put here, and I'll put these in chat in a second, that's just a link to the training I've been doing with newcomers. We've now done 3.5 hours, I think, and into over 2 different sessions. And certainly in the first session of that, there was quite a lot of discussion about measures and choice of measures and et cetera, et cetera. So that might be relevant as well. So that's that question. And I'll put those links into the chat in a minute. If you discharge a client and forget to send the link to the SRS or other feedback scale, is there a way to undischarge them in order to do this? Well, thing is, I'm not sure what this person means by discharge, because in Pragmatic Tracker, if you close a case, you do that by going up to the profile. You've got open and close over on the right-hand side. You click on close, it puts it onto your close list. Now, if you realized you'd done that and you thought, oh, I wanted to get feedback on that last session, you would need to go to your close list, find the client, click on profile and reopen the case first of all. Once you've done that, if you go to the session that you wanted the feedback on, which would presumably be your last session, as long as that session was within 6 days or less, like in other words, if 2 days had gone by since the session, the link to the feedback measure will still be live. It stays live for up to 6 days, I think, including all the hours up to 6 times 24. The reason it's not 7 is because the assumption would be that often you might be seeing a client on a weekly basis and you'd need another feedback for that next session. So it stays live for 6 days. And then you simply send it. And the other point, of course, is if you use the auto function in Pragmatic Tracker, it will automatically send out those links anyway. So I hope that answers that for whoever was asking it. Could there be more than 3 HG intervention lists? So you saw last month, wet edge of the paintbrush, new ideas about capturing interventions, and I came up with this drop-down list stuff and all the rest of it. I felt it was very clunky, trying to have 3 different boxes, and people wanted more. It was obvious that people do often far more than 3 different things. So working with our developer, we redesigned the whole thing. And so a couple of months has gone by, and I have today the new feature to show you, which is going to go live on Saturday. And I think it's a far better solution. So I thought this other question was very interesting. Does it matter which 3 HG interventions we tick, because maybe some are sort of more important than others? And I'm completely agnostic about that. I don't think there's a hierarchy of like big hitter interventions. You do whatever you do to help your clients in whatever way. So I mean, I suppose an interesting point that would pull out of this would be to do with rewind, particularly, or any type of de-traumatization, because it will be interesting eventually to think, well, what were the shifts in outcome results for clients post rewind, as opposed to other particular interventions that might take place. But anyway, all this will be live, and I'll be showing you this shortly. If the client achieves a set goal in therapy, so you've set some goals and the client has achieved one of those goals and then wants to add another goal, is there a way of stopping the system taking an average of the 2? Can the scores be separate? Well, the answer to this is sort of no and yes. Is there a way of stopping the system taking an average of the 2? No. The average will always be the average of the goals inserted. However, you may not know this, but you can actually look at the chart of all of the individual goals as their own separate line. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. Each goal can be tracked separately. The best outcome measures for addiction, would it still be GAD-7, GAD-7 being general anxiety? Well, there is a measure that I'm familiar with that we have in other systems called the audit, which is for alcohol addiction. If people want to have that made available to them, I'm very happy to put that in the system and turn it on for whoever wants. Simply email me to point that out. We may have other measures to do with drug addiction as well, because we work with an organization in California that treats drug addictions, and I have a feeling that they might have some measures, so I can have a look for that. So if you have some particular interest in this, please just email me and I'll look further into it. But I know we certainly have the audit, and I can put that in if people are interested to have that. Now, as a nearly qualified HG therapist, it would be really helpful to see some examples of how others have completed session notes. Well, my recommendation here really is to discuss this with your supervisor. I think you'll find that there's a whole variety of ways people capture notes, from very brief bullet points to essays. Pragmatic Tracker, you can use it whatever way you want. There's the notes field there. It's up to you to do it that way. I think the important thing is to look up on the HGI members area information about, you know, the minimum requirement of note gathering. It's not for me to say myself, to be honest. Ask your supervisor and discuss it in peer groups that you might be part of as well, is what I would suggest. And if there's I had put that in case anyone wanted to volunteer to help whoever that person is, they can ask. So okay, right, so that's that bit. So what I'm going to do is just unshare my screen for a moment to see if you're all okay with that, and or you have any additional questions. Now is the time before I go into the stuff about goals.
I was going to ask Bill about the GAD7 and the I'm not even sure what was the other one.
PHQ-9.
PHQ-9. I
Yeah.
used those and I found them really difficult to use over the phone, and so I went back to Core 10 and ORS and PRN 14.
Yeah.
Thing.
That's completely fine. You know, I mean, the thing is, I was bringing this up not because, I mean, I've resisted all of this for years because I, like yourself, love that combination. They're my favorites, ORS, Core 10 and PRN 14, because there's a lovely wide range of stuff covered by them, and it's not all heavy, miserable stuff, you know. It's ORS is like a version of how are you, and PRN 14 is all positively orientated, you know. So they would be my choice as well. The challenge is trying to create a data set that is comparable with the published IAP data. That's the challenge, right? So I was putting it out there for people to mess about with them, get a feel for them, see what they thought, because the idea would be at some point in the future, whenever I can line up all the ducks, would be to sort of say, right, would there be 10 of you who are willing to volunteer to measure your next 10 cases, for example, using the IAP measures? So you're not committed to it forever, but so that we could come up with a data set. I mean, the more clients, the better, but maybe I could get 20 of you to do it. 20 of you for 10 clients each, which would produce 200 cases. And that should be more than enough to do the job, you see. But I agree with you, Lucy. I don't like them either, you know, and that's why I've sort of been, I'd far prefer to say, look, there you go. There's your bloody evidence that what we do works. Now go away and leave us alone. Let us get on with what we normally do, you know? Corinne.
Yeah, I'd agree with Lucy absolutely as well. I much prefer the Core 10 and the PRN 14, but I absolutely passionately think that we need to validate ourselves alongside IAPT, because there's so much research about IAPT and people really being, you know, funneled down that is, you know, the be all and end all. That is what they should be undertaking, to the detriment of all the other potential interventions that are available on the marketplace, you know, including us, obviously.
Exactly.
And I'd definitely be prepared to do 10 clients.
Great.
I'm already doing it, even though I hate the
PA. So that was the thing. I've been sowing the seed, you see. Joe.
Same thing. I totally agree with Corinne there. I'm much more comfortable with the lovely old cozy duvet of the Core 10, the RS, the PRN. But since our last session, I think it was the last one, Bill, when you put out this thing, I have pushed myself into the discomfort zone of the GAD7, the PHQ-9, and I've used your PCL for the
Have you? Amazing, amazing.
And I'm getting used to it, because it's really just what we're used to be honest.
That's right.
And once you've got a feel for, okay, this one needs to go up, this one goes down, this is what the questions are, it's okay. It gets,
you get used to it,
And I say yes, please, to addiction measures. I've always been looking for an addiction measure.
All right, okay, great. So we'll look further into that, you know.
And I had one more comment, if I can.
Of
so
course,
I don't
no, go
say
on.
too much, but I had a supervisor's training session yesterday, so this is really hot off the press. But
good.
The moment's almost passed, because it was where you were talking about, wouldn't it be interesting to look at how Rewind, you know, just to filter it on Rewind and see how the measures look and everything. I would just say one little caveat there, which I know everyone knows, is that Rewind is not the be all and end all.
No,
you know, we obviously only use it as a means to an end when it is within the context of a goal which is relevant, where the person clearly could benefit from a Rewind. I just wanted to drop that in. It's not.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And actually, in many ways, this whole interventions thing, I mean, my hypothesis would be, in fact, that you know, doing the rewind isn't necessarily that strongly associated with huge improvement, you know, that it may be other things. There may be greater jumps in improvement following sessions where no rewind was done at all, and there were other things done, you know. That would be my own hypothesis about it, which would be an interesting one to test. The whole point about all of this, though, is it's sort of expanding the capability of the database to allow us to ask better questions, to tease out more about actually what do HG people do, what sort of problems do they treat, what are the goals their clients set. This is all part of this, you know. So it's like becoming more and more sophisticated as we're going on here, you know. Thanks, Joe. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was just talking about all the different measures and how, you know, using them selectively can be so rewarding for us personally.
Yes.
Because one of my friend's daughter had a car accident and was officially diagnosed with PTSD and had been suffering really badly for a couple of years. And so I very bravely forced myself to use the IES 15 with her before and after. And the dramatic result was just, it blew me and her away, because I was able to share the results with her. And she went from 43, where apparently 44 is severe PTSD.
Yeah.
And she scored 43, and she went down to 3 after
Amazing.
a 40-minute rewind.
Yeah, amazing.
And the two of us just, you know, when she sent me back her results, we were absolutely gobsmacked. And so on a personal level, it's so worth doing that if it's the right thing to do with trauma, and to use the right thing at the right time to sort of get that feedback.
Thanks very much for that, Elizabeth. And I mean, that's just really shows the strength of all of this. It's very reinforcing for you as a therapist as well.
Yeah.
You know, you're seeing some hard evidence about the effectiveness of what you're doing. Because it's very, you know, you forget, you know, you've clients who improve, but then you have days when things go horribly wrong, and, you know, and you think, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing here. It's very good to be able to go back and look at your results and remind yourself that actually, you know, it's okay, I'm doing pretty well. Brilliant. Any more? Are we okay? Good. Sorry, Amanda.
Now, what was the PCL for trauma? I must have missed that.
Oh yeah, PCL5 is
PCL5.
Yeah, it's sort of very much fits in with the DSM diagnostic criteria for trauma. The IES measure is actually very, very old. It came from the 70s, before PTSD was even invented. There was no term PTSD back then. PCL5 is more, it's, to be honest, it's the one that's recommended in IAPT, you see. So it's, again, having a set of data with PCL5 would be better than IES 15, you know.
And one more thing.
Yeah.
My background was in nursing and general practice. And so for me, I found I was really comfortable with GAD7 and PHQ-9 because that's what I was familiar with, entering data, and I've stuck with that because my comforting duvet is that, where it's so it's all what you're used to,
there's
isn't it?
Number one on my list.
Yeah, because I've been using them for a long time.
Oh, very good.
In Pragmatic Tracker, yeah.
Great, thanks, Amanda. Joe, you have another one? No, unmute yourself, Joe.
Sorry, one final question that not a question, but a point that might be helpful. I've got a really lovely chart of a client I've been working with for a number of sessions. And initially they were literally psychotic and terribly deluded and incredibly paranoid. So we had to work really gradually and slowly. And I stayed off the guided imagery at first, but then they got a lot better. And can I share the screen and show?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just, in fact, that's, you're doing exactly what I was going to suggest for the next meeting, to ask you guys to do this. So this is great to have an initial example.
Okay, so I think you need to allow me to.
I have done, I think.
Yep, brilliant. Okay, I've got it ready. So can everyone see that?
Yeah, perfect.
So the reason I wanted to show this is not to sort of show off or anything, because obviously we can't control how our clients.
I'd want to show off if that was my case, Joe.
But look, actually they weren't that bad. And then under me, after 3 sessions, they had a terrible setback. So, you know, look how brilliant I was first. So they got into a really, really bad place, series of circumstances in their life, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Then they did an amazing bounce back. Then they had another setback. So this is dating back from November right through to now. Had an amazing bounce back, another setback. bounce back further, another smaller setback, bounce back, bounce back, bounce back, little setback, bounce back, tiny setback, bounce forward.
Right.
And so yesterday was kind of like, we should really call it bounce forward, not bounce back.
Yeah, that's good.
I was able to show them, send them a copy of this and to say, look, yes, you'll have ups and downs in your life, but the point is, initially, you were literally like a roller coaster. You were starting from a really bad place. Now you're in such a strong place that even if you have a setback, which you will, because we all do, you're just going to go like that. And then you're going to keep bouncing and keep, you know, you're in such a state. Your bounces are now tiny little ripples on the surface. So anyway, that was just,
that's brilliant, Joan. I mean, so it's just a picture painting 1,000 words, isn't it? And making the point, you know, that's lovely. Yeah.
And the other thing I said to them is, look, keep that and remind yourself that whatever happens to you from now, nothing takes away that progress you've made. That is what you keep. And, you know, you could see the pride and the sense of achievement. I find it very therapeutic to use that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Anyway,
brilliant. That's a lovely illustration. Thanks very much. Okay. Elizabeth, have you something else?
Sorry, I was just going to agree with that I've had similar, not quite so dramatic. I mean, that's really encouraging to see, actually. But there are times when I'm thinking one of my clients is doing incredibly well, and then they have a really, really high score on their anxiety. And I just think, oh no, this is so disappointing. I thought we were, you know, really getting somewhere. But actually, when I've then asked them about it and you speak to them face to face, they might say, oh, I was just really anxious because I went back to work this week and I was really worried about it, but I've actually managed my goals really well. And I've still, you know, they're coming on a long way, but they still might have anxiety about a small part of their life. Like a friend of mine who was one of my clients is a hairdresser, went back to work and was anxious about the volume of work to get back into the swing of things after so much time not working. But actually, in terms of her actual problem that we were working on, she was making progress. So sometimes the charts don't reflect everything. They're a point for you to start your conversation at the beginning of every session, aren't they?
Exactly. And in fact, you've very nicely made a point that I'd intended to make anyway, which is sometimes the actual incongruence between measures is what's most interesting. So, and classically, you may see with goals that somebody's working towards their goals successfully, but their anxiety has increased. And their anxiety might be increased because their goal might be, I don't know, whatever it could be, public speaking, going out of the house, you know, if they're agoraphobic, or going back to work where they were struggling, or whatever it might be. So they're pushing themselves to actually achieve the goals, but they're increasing their anxiety at the same time. And this is why the whole point about this is conversation enhancement tools is the really important thing, you know, and to work at the face value of the information you're getting, and then be curious about it and ask the clients about it. That's brilliant, Elizabeth. That's a great illustration of that, which actually comes in very nicely onto the bit about goals. So I'll carry onto that now. Is that okay? I'll take it. It is. Right. No, I need to find goals. That's it. Okay, goals, right? So here we go. So I want to talk about the importance of capturing goals and how it helps with validation of the client's experience of how things are for themselves. A little bit about how it helps in our organizing and our focus, and obviously tracking progress as well. Now, what I do want to say about this whole goals business is that it's rooted in empirical science. So there's a chap called Duncan Laws, who used to be a neighbor of Jo's when she lived in London, who wrote this book, Working with Goals in Psychotherapy and Counseling, with Mick Cooper. Professor Mick Cooper, he's at Roehampton University. And Duncan Laws has a paper-based version of goal-based outcomes, which when I came into contact with him, what we were already doing in Pragmatic Tracker was so close, I wanted to get them identical so that we could say they're one and the same thing, which helps our empirical basis because of all the work he's already done on that. And of course, it's RIGAAR, goals is central in the whole human givens approach. So it does have this empirical basis with this book. You know, you could Google Duncan Laws goal-based outcomes and you'll find plenty of stuff about him there. So I suppose some of the points I've always wanted to make about this is that standardized measures do not tell us about the aspirations, wishes, and desires of this client in front of us. So Core 10, whatever the measures are standardized instruments used across the board with all of our clients, but it's not telling us about this client. Well, what is it that this client wants to see change taking place on? And when we identify areas of challenge with clients, their goals often tend to emerge from that anyway, because they'll often be the sort of antithesis of that. So in your discussion, that's what might be helpful. And of course, it's important to help clients to identify small, achievable, measurable goals that they can focus on in the work we're doing with them. And it provides a tangible way of assessing that they're indeed moving in the right direction. And my final point about this is that aggregated data around goals gives us as a group so much more to say for our work. Going back to those fictitious 100 cases or 200 cases, for example, if as well as having GAD7, PHQ9 and PCL5 when there's trauma, if we also had a rich body of data of the actual goals that clients wanted to achieve for those cases, we would have an awful lot more to say. You get far more than one paper out of that data set. So that's sort of, thinking of organizational support. Now, there's this point about to capture or to track. So you can use Pragmatic Tracker simply to capture the goals without scoring them, but you can also use it to track the goals. But you can also use Pragmatic Tracker to capture the problems and not track them. And if we get a chance, I'll try and say a little bit more about that towards the end, and why I think that's also useful and important. How to track, finding the words, helping the client find their own words. It's very important. Bear in mind that however you label the goal in Pragmatic Tracker, that is the client's goal. It's not your goal for the client, really. It's about the client's own language, really. It's about, now you may work that out together in negotiation with the client, but the words that you write in when you first create a goal, because basically you're building a measure, a goals measure, should be the words when the client reads them the next time, they recognize them as their own language, if you like, and scoring, and we'll talk about that. So how does all this work in Pragmatic Tracker? So this is where we go to take a look. And I'll jump across into it now. I need to get to the right. I'm not used to working on one screen. Excuse me muttering to myself here now while I find the right place to go. There's where I need to be, is it? Yes, that'll do. Okay, so I've got a bit of a fictitious case in here to sort of show you how this all works. Okay. Right. So I just created this pretend case and used an ORS as the primary measure, and then we worked with goals as well. Now, there are a few key points. Should you choose to experiment, if you're not currently using this for goals, to experiment with? There's a few key points that are very important. The first is, in the profile section, if you want to have the option to have the client score their own goals, this box will need to be ticked. Now, you can tick it session by session by session as well, but if you tick it in profile, it will always be ticked by default. You may say, well, I'm not going to measure goals at every session, and that's fine. In which case you would untick it in the session that you're setting up. But at least if you've ticked it in profile, it'll be chosen for you. So that's the first point, profile, right? The second point is this. Let's go back and look at this 6th of February. So on the 6th of February, sorry, that's the ORS. The goals were put in to drink less, be kind to my wife. Now, if you are in a session today, Thursday, the 29th of April, and it's 5 o'clock, and you've written down the goals on your notes, but you've got to write it up in Pragmatic Tracker yet, because obviously they're not in there yet. If you wait till tomorrow, which is the 30th of April, to insert the goals, what will happen is when you go to add a goal, it will default to today's date. And if you don't change that date to yesterday, to the day you did the session, the goals won't appear in Pragmatic Tracker associated with that session. They will be there the next time, but they won't be there if you want to score it. So it's very important that the date of the goal being reported matches the session that the goal was reported in. That's crucially important. Otherwise, you'll be contacting me and saying, Bill, I can't make head nor tail of this. I put in these 3 goals and I can't find them anywhere to score them. You must make sure the date is the date that they're reported on. So that's that point. Now, if you imagine, I'll just go back into, pretend I'm setting up that session for the first time. So you can see the goals is grayed out because it was ticked in profile already anyway, and it's been scored already. But so it would be chosen for you. In fact, let me show you with like adding a new session, how that looks. I just have to assign this here. So you can see, there we go. The goals is chosen. Now, if I didn't want to ask the client about filling in those goals along with the other measures, I can untick it. But if it isn't ticked, it won't appear to the client and you won't have them available to score. So there are just a few little housekeeping things about keeping it, right? Now, the other point I want to make is the language around how you capture goals. That's fine. I just want to share with you the Bill Andrews style, and you can then say, well, I'll have my own way of doing it. But I just thought if it's helpful maybe to share with you what I do with clients. Now, another point is, at the very first time you see a client, the client might be very, very distressed. And I'll just come out of here for a second. It might be the case that the language around goals, it's just not the time for it. The client is too distressed. You need to work on lowering their emotional arousal, doing whatever you do at that typical first session. And you don't feel that necessarily that first session is the time to capture goals. And that's completely fine. Generally speaking, in my own way of working, I'm always keen to get some sort of a goal. I like the idea of the client being orientated towards moving forward in whatever direction it is. And the words that I use are along the following lines. Mary, so should you choose to work with me over the next period of time, what is the most important thing that you need to see change taking place on, so you know the work we're doing together is helping you? So quite a long sentence. What is the most important thing that you need to see change taking place on, so you know the work we're doing together is helping? What I have found about using those words is it sends the client on an internal search, and they got to identify something. And they think like, okay, which of all this mumbo jumbo of awful stuff that's going on, what is the most important thing that would really make a difference to me? And it might often be something very concrete, like if I could just sleep better. And or if I could have a conversation with my partner, or whatever it might be. And you say, great, Mary. Now you write down, and this is what I mean about looking for the words of the client. So the title of the goal wants to be something fairly short, like to sleep better. But you can unpack that a bit more then. So tell me a bit more about that. Well, if I could just drop off to sleep at night, or whatever it might be, and you can have the detail then to drop off to sleep at night within half an hour, whatever it might be. So then you've got your detail, you've got the label of the goal, just a short few words, and then the detail a bit more, but in the client's language. And then you come to scoring. So then the way to do the scoring is along the lines of, so Mary, if if 0 is no progress at all towards that goal, and 10 is, you know, fully achieved, and 5 is halfway along, where do you think you are at the moment? And Mary says 2. So you've got your score of that goal at the starting point, right? Now, if you don't do the score at that starting point, you won't have the opportunity to capture how low it is at that starting point to insert in that first session. So it is the ideal time to do it. If you don't score it, it's not the end of the world. They will score it the next time. It'll be presented to them and they can score it the next time. But I always like to get that first score because then it creates the room for movement in the score sort of going forward, you know. Now, they're the Bill Andrews words, but you find your own words. But it's something along those lines of getting something concrete from the client, something identifiable, achievable, all those things about a SMART goal. Not, you know, a goal like, if I could just be happy, well, wow, you know, great. That's no goddamn use to me, is it? I need something much more what? Well, what would you be doing if you were happy? If I was videoing you being happy, what would you be up to? Well, how would it look like? You know, I want something concrete to get from the client, you know. Now, if the client says, you know, to sleep better, and you're 2 out of 10, great, Mary. Tell me, is there anything else on this shopping list that you'd like to put down? What's the next most important thing after that? I'd always try to get 2 goals if I could. No, you don't have to. It's fine. You know, 1 is a great start, and you can add on as many as you want as you go along, as we'll see. But you know, there might be a follow-on goal from to sleep better, and it might be to whatever it might be, to I don't know, to go for a walk every day or something like that, to take exercise, walk every day. Great. Where are you at the moment? Oh, not at all. 0, you know, and on you go, right? So you get those goals, and then you go back to your pragmatic tracker, and you, so I need to go back over there again now. So let me see if I'm going to go through all of this now to add a new session. So imagine that the client's in with me today, for example, therapy, 29th at 10:41, RS goals, great. I'd have used a PRN F5 with them, probably create that session. And obviously they have a lot of goals in here already, but I'm going to add another goal today, right? So I don't know, to visit my mother, whatever it might be. So that goal is in there today. And Mary, where are you on the score of that? I'm 3. I've create that goal. Now you can see the score isn't there yet. So Mary leaves the room, and I go into that session record. I scroll down to the goals. She would have already scored all the other ones that are there, but you can see to visit my mother is there, and she says it's 3. So I can score that. She might have already scored all these other goals because she got presented with them already, you see? And close. And so then that will have captured the score right there, okay? I'll just stop there and see if you have any questions before I tell you another couple of things, okay? Right, how are we doing? Joe.
Just a very simple one, Bill, because I've never dared, despite being a veteran of Pragmatic Tracker, I have never dared to use the goals, and you're making me feel really excited about it. But my question is, so are you saying that in the session you're typing that, or can I just write it on my piece of paper and then put it after?
Yeah, that's what I do. I just have, you know, I don't go typing stuff in sessions. I just have a bit of paper, just write the goal down there, and then I pop it into Pragmatic Tracker afterwards.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other points, questions? Everyone's okay. Elizabeth, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yep. So yes, that's really useful actually, because I've been using it, but what I've done is I've entered the goal at that first session, but haven't got the score off them at the very first session. Right. I've got the score off them as they're approaching planning to come to the next session. So you're
Yeah.
not, so you've already had one session with them.
Yeah.
So I'll say, okay, well, let's write that down as the goal. And then I don't send it until I send it with the sort of
Yeah.
bundle of questions
Yeah.
online.
There's
So that's quite useful to capture it sooner.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. That's completely fine. The only thing is, you may have get a considerable improvement from the identity of the goal, and I want the credit for that associated with the therapy.
Yeah, that's good to know.
So
Actually,
that's the only reason for that, you know.
Yeah, I like that.
But you know, you have circumstances alter cases. You've got to make your judgment. You know, the relationship. You know, you can't be too pushy about this stuff with clients either, you know, and a lot depends, you know, maybe you need that first session to build the rapport before you go putting stuff in their face about scoring and stuff like that, you know. So circumstances will always alter cases, but in general, that's the sort of approach I take to try to get that score the first time, you know. Yeah, great. Any other points right now? No, we're okay. Good, fantastic. Right now, just going back here. So, and this relates to the question that came up about, you know, if a client has achieved a goal. So, you know, client comes in that first time and they identify one goal to sleep better and maybe another goal to walk 3 times a week. You go through treatment, you get to session 3 and you see that, you know, they'd started off at a score of 2 on to sleep better and now they're scoring 8, right? So, I mean, I'd be delighted to score to sleep well 8 out of 10. Fantastic. So you may not want to keep pestering the client about that goal anymore. You say, look, you know, it's already in the bag. We've got there, right? But you want to keep it. Of course, the record of it is still there. What you can do is you can deactivate the goal so that it doesn't come up. Because remember, what you've done with these 5 goals here, you've created 5 items of a goals questionnaire. So if you don't want one of those items to appear the next time when they go out with their core 10 and all the rest of it, you can deactivate it. And all you simply do, you say, let's say I didn't want to ask about drinking anymore. I simply deactivate it there. And when I deactivate it, you'll see when I go back to the list, there's now a cross there, right? Now that means the goal is still captured because obviously the client's made that improvement and you want to keep that there for the record, but it simply means it will be dropped off the questionnaire. So instead of being a 5-item questionnaire now, it'll be a 3-item questionnaire when it's presented to the client. I hope that's making sense. That is one reason you would want to switch it off. There is another reason as well. You might want to switch it off. At that first session, or at any point, the client might identify a goal, but both you and the client know that currently with where they're at, it's simply unrealistic. It's like they need to walk before they can run. They need to get control of their traumatic experiences, or they need to lower their anxiety before they can do that. So it's a nice way of capturing the goal, but not activating it yet. So that, you know, it's like, okay, that's on our business list and we're going to get there, but we're not quite ready to tackle it yet. That's another reason that you might want to enter it in the first place. In that case, you wouldn't score it at all and you would just deactivate it, but it would remind both you and the client, well, it would remind you when you're looking at the goals, you know, we have this other order of business that we want to get to as well, you know. Obviously, you can have that in your notes as well, but it's sort of putting it in front of you a bit more, you know. Now, so that's activation and deactivation. Let me just check with you guys so I can see you all. Are you all, Joe? Joe, I can't hear you.
Sorry, yeah,
Okay.
sorry to ask so many questions. It's brilliant. I'm just thinking, okay, so I could see the tab intriguingly next to that for charts. So how is that going to look? Are you going to come on to show
I'm
us?
just going to show you now.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll keep zipped up.
Everybody else okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay. So let's go to charts. Right. Now, when we go to charts, remember now you've got, it used to be all or one. Now it's all or any. So if you click all, you get everything showing up. If you turn all that off and you say, I want to look at goals and ORS, It'll show both goals and ORS together. If you want to look at goals on their own, you look at that. But here's the thing. So what happens is you get if you have just goals ticked there, you get the aggregate score of all of the goals. So this goes back to that question that was raised, right? So the goals are, you have 4 goals scored 0 to 10, each goal, 4 10s 40, add all the scores up, divide by the total score, you get an average, and then you get this plotted chart, right? However, if you tick goal 1, goal 2, etc., etc., you can see all of the goals have their own chart. And in fact, you can turn off the aggregate and just look at the individual journey of all of the goals together, you know? So this would be very helpful, again, in that conversation with your client where, you know, for example, the green one, okay, there was a setback, but at the time there was a setback on the green one, whatever the other one was, exercise more, drink less, you know, whatever it is, you'll be able to see the journey of one goal relative to the other goals. I hope that's making sense, and I hope that might answer your question, Joe. Let me just check back in with you all. Okay, that's got it. Yeah. So that way you can look at how is a goal doing, you know, on an individual basis, and you know, if there's some particular goal, it might be that you need to have a lot more discussion with the client about that particular goal, and it might be that it's got a setback, and you're able to look at how well that has gone. So that's gone great. So this one we need to do a bit more work on, etc., etc. You know, so it's sort of unpacking that story a little bit, and I think all of this really helps with engagement with the client, because clients get very excited about all this stuff, as I'm sure you're already finding. Just, you know, like Joe, like you said with the core 10, it's such a powerful story for the client about their journey, isn't it? You know, so that's the bit about goals. I'm doing a bit better today. You know, I was sort of really running like crazy at the end yesterday. I was running out of time. With this smaller group, it's a little bit easier maybe. Now, let me just check with you a second. Are there, am I clear? The real take homes about this goal thing is, make sure if you want to do it, make sure it's on in profile. Make sure it's ticked in the session record. If you decided for some, you know, for whatever reason, you don't want to measure them at every session, you can untick it in the session record, and then it won't present to the client, but it must be ticked. Number 2. Number 3, critically important, is when you enter a goal, the date that you enter the goal must correspond with the session, so the session record that it's associated with. Otherwise, it won't appear it just won't appear on the drop down. I think they're all the main points about it. Are there any questions about it beyond that? Is that clear? You think you can get your heads around it? I would really recommend, by the way, as I always do, test client, make yourself the client, send the stuff back and forth to yourself, so you get the experience of what it's like as a client to fill this stuff in, and you see what it's like, you know. Joe.
Can you switch them on with a client you're already working with where you haven't put them in initially? I guess you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And you know, experiment, you know. Interestingly, Duncan Laws, when he isn't even interested in the aggregate score of goals at all. He's only interested in all the different journeys of all the different goals, you know. And also, you know, not precious about, this is so important, not to get hung up on oh, I must capture the score at the first session or whatever it is, you know. This is all about, it's really where I see it as a sort of a sophisticated maturation of this whole process, where it becomes more process than outcome as such. It's more, of course, it all helps outcomes, but it's not just about, you know, getting a great score. It's about using this stuff therapeutically to help in the work and the engagement with your client, you know. Okay, good. So I have time to make my final point about problems. Now, in Pragmatic Tracker, problems. There we go. Oops, sorry. Go back. Where's my goalie? Goalie. Right. Now, RIGAAR, it's not RIPAAR. So like the whole human givens approach is very much solution focused. It's orientating towards moving towards the achievement of goals, expectations, etc. However, it's extraordinarily valuable in reporting on data to actually have a record of the type of problems that a client has attended with, number one, and number two, the chronicity of that problem. In other words, how long has the problem been there? So for example, in the case of PTSD resolution, a lot of these clients who come to PTSD resolution have long protracted problems of, 5 years or more. That's very different to somebody having a traumatic experience that's of 3 months duration. And so being able to record that is very important. Now, the way we built the problems section in Pragmatic Tracker is actually identical to goals, except turned upside down. So the worst problem would be is 10, the best it could be is 0. But what I'm suggesting, and it actually only, we've had this feature for years, but it only really dawned on me. The reason we did it like that is because there are various therapeutic orientations that are much more focused on the investigation of the problem and the language around problems and all the rest of it. So we wanted to offer people the ability to track the progress of goals improving, or to track the reduction in problems over time. Now, of course, a measure like Core 10 captures a reduction in problems over time as well. But my suggestion for you is this, that get into tracking goals. I think that's great. But if you were, because you do this anyway, you in your note taking, you're finding out what, it's part of the process, isn't it? You're establishing what are the problems, what are the key issues that are going on for a client at the moment, how long have they been going on, and then you get into the goals and where they want to move to. So you're doing this in your notes anyway, but it would be hugely valuable to simply add in the problems and the chronicity of the problems. So in other words, you never tick that down there. You see, if I tick that, we could go into scoring the problems, right? But what now, I have a caveat to this. It might, remember I said that at the very first session with a client, it may be that they can't get their head around the idea of goals. And you actually might want to track their problems, which you can do, right? And it works in basically the same way. And you'd say, if that problem, what if the worst that problem is 10, and the best it could be is 0, where you can do all of that, right? But what I'm really suggesting here is something a bit different. I'm suggesting don't worry about tracking scores of problems at all. Track the scores of the goals. But however, use this problems tab to do it just like this, right? Whatever you'd be writing in your notes anyway, write down a label for the problem, the date it was raised, and how long the problem has been going on. So it's a very quick way then for you to, instead of wading through all of your notes, you can actually quickly identify what was the problem the client was suffering from and how long have they had that problem going on. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up is because I've realized that it's been sitting there as an underused feature, and yet it's there. Like, you all do this anyway. You're no doubt, I'm sure you've all in your notes, you'll be, what are the main things going on for the client, etc., etc. And so this is a way of formalizing it a bit more. Going back to that idea of the research project, which I hope we're going to do. Again, you can imagine this adds enormous depth to the quality of the data. So if you imagine you've got a story where, okay, we've got 100 clients. They're measured with GAD-7 and PHQ-9. We know what their problems were, and we know how long those problems were going on for them for. We know what their goals were, and we know how much they've moved towards achieving those goals. Now that is a hell of a story to be able to tell. And so I wanted to bring this up because it's a way of simply using the problems feature without getting involved in measurement at all, although that facility is there as well. But it's a way of sort of clearly delineating, and those problems can be as long as you want, how they are doing. So I'll stop the screen share and see what your reaction to all that is in my 10:59. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bill, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely, Doreen.
I have wondered which of the outcome measures would be
Oh,
the best one to use to measure anger. And I decided I would use actually the problems one last time I saw this client. So I had to go for the first time and I used it as problem and he did actually score it.
Yeah,
but
perfect.
now I totally get what you're saying. And actually what I should have maybe done instead was to use it, the goal rather than the problem.
Well, exactly.
Sort of change
you
it
could
from
say,
a negative to positive.
Yeah. To manage my angry
more,
outburst or whatever it might be, you know, you could turn it around like that, you know.
But is there an outcome measure for anger that you would suggest other than just using goals?
I'm sure there is, but there's not one that I'm aware of, you know. And I think using the goals and or the problems features is a great way when the outcome measure doesn't quite capture what it is you're trying to show the change taking place on, you know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
great.
You.
I wanted to I'd asked Elizabeth for permission to show a slide of one of her clients because I was so thrilled, Elizabeth, that like as a newcomer to all of this, you've sort of engaged with it all so well and you cracked on with it and did all of this. So that's why I asked you. So I just quickly, just if you can bear with me for 1 minute, I think I have to go to there and find this case of there we
I
are.
have to say, I'm glad I'm here because I wasn't quite using them the right way. I was using problems. I was scoring problems and I was feeling a little bit uncomfortable about it. And I was noticing that problems were tending to sometimes get worse or not improve while goals were improving.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm really, really comfortable with this, what you've explained to us today. So thank you so much. I've learned so much about that.
That's brilliant. So this is a case of Elizabeth's, and you can see it's the goals started getting measured at, and that would be it. You'd have entered it after the first session notes, and then the client scored it the second time. And I've no doubt had they scored it the first time, it would have been probably lower, the score. But what I thought was so interesting about this is how well the goal, look at that blue and the red line. I mean, they're wrapped around each other. So the correlation is probably like 0.9 or something like that. They're swimming along together, telling the same story. And I thought that was beautiful, you know. So just look at that. To me, it's amazing. So it just goes to show, and this was just to show the other slide of unpacking all of those individual goals, then separating them all out like that, you know. So well done on that. I thought that was great. Well, look, 2 minutes past 11. That's not too bad. Any final things from anybody who wants to chip in or anything? One thing I did say last night to the other guys was I sort of feel once every 2 months is probably about right for these meetings. Once a month, I think, is maybe a bit, you know, everyone's busy and it's so you're happy with that? Roughly once every 2 months? Yeah, great. Okay. Now, on that point, and Joe's already both Joe and Elizabeth really have kickstarted this. What I would like to do is to actually hear more from you guys about case studies, simply, you know, a few minutes about a case with, and it might be, you know, between now and 2 months time, you have a go with this goal stuff and you could have examples of that. I think that would be very, very valuable. And I would also, of course, find that very interesting to hear exactly how you're getting on with all of this, you know. But rather than just me rabbiting on about stuff, to sort of hear more about your experience of this and where it's helping and all the rest of it. Of course, oh God, I have to show you something before you go. Can you bear with me for 2 minutes? I have to show you this. Oh my God, I nearly forgot this. This is very important. Hang on. Stop share again. 1 second. Oh Lord God, how do I get out of there? Where am I? There. Sessions. There we go. Right. It's the bit about interventions. So following on from all your feedback, etc., what we've done is I kept asking people, keep telling me what are all the typical sort of interventions that are done by human givens therapists. I was asked to include some other stuff, some I wasn't familiar with actually, multi-minds, which is actually based on a Pat Williams recording. And actually there's a whole book called Multi-Minds that Malcolm Hansen showed me last night, pulled it off his shelf to show. So I thought that was very interesting. Now, the question came up last night about other, because the fact is that no matter how exhaustive this list is, there will always be other things that people do. And so I was trying to get away from having an other, because if you have an other, then you need another box to explain what the other is. But the feeling last night was, no, we want the other, because, and actually, it is pretty important, I think, really, because it means that, yes, there's all the classic HG stuff, but people may do other things with their clients that they also find very beneficial. And it's a sort of way of documenting it, you know. So the clunky way it has been up to now and still is in your live system at the moment will be gone completely. Now, to be honest, it's been experimental. I wanted to see how people got on with it and get feedback from people. And we decided that this was a much better way of doing it. So we got this built rather than it just being an extra subcode field added in, you know. And so basically in any given session, you can just go tick, 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 whatever you did. If you think there's anything crucially missing off this, please let me know, because we can add more stuff in. We are going to add other, and then below delivery mode, there'll be a box that says other details, and you can free text, and you can just write some stuff in there, you know. So I'm sorry, I'm sorry for taking your time, but I didn't want to forget to show you that. And that will be live, I think, on Saturday for you. Is that okay? Great.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay, listen, thank you very much. That was great fun. I really enjoyed it. Great to see you all. And I'll see those of you who want to pitch up again for another session in a couple of months' time. And I will be annoying you to ask you if you'd like to share a bit of a case story, you know? Okay?
Yep.
So
Thank you very much, Phil.
Okay, guys, all the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.